Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's New York Music Month Extended Play Workshop. My name is Shira Gans, and I'm the Senior Executive Director of Policy and Programs at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. If you guys aren't familiar with our office, we are the city agency that supports all the creative industries in New York City. One of the ways we do that kind of stuff is through programs like New York Music Month. Historically, this is a program we just ran in June, but this year, because of the pandemic, we've been running since January. So please check out the website where you can find upcoming programs for this month and also check out recordings of previous programs that we've had. Pretty excited for today. This year for Music Month Extended Play, we've had the opportunity to partner with Concord for the first time, and we've been doing some great content. So today's pretty relevant. It's about publishing, about A&R in the Zoom age from a music publishing perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to kick us off and introduce the panel. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, Shira, so much. And thanks to Shira Games and the New York Music Month Extended Play for having us. And thanks to old Caroline Goomer for setting this up and making this all happen. My name is Tom DeSavia. I'm SVP of Publishing A&R based in Los Angeles, California. So that is why my hair is still wet, because it's only 9 a.m. here. So I'm up very early to hang with you beautiful people. I would like, unfortunately, we have two fallen soldiers today, and our associates, Harry and Mary in London, both have taken ill and will not be able to join us. Harry, Mary, we miss you. We hate you for not being here, and we will see you next week. In the meantime, I'm really proud to introduce, we have, I can't say it enough, and I can't say it emphatically enough. This in my career is the best, most soulful, creative, and just damn friendly crew I've worked with in my life. And I'm really proud to introduce you to some of them. There's only a few here. Grace Adiyama from Los Angeles. We'll say hello, Grace. Excellent. Pablo Ahogado from Miami. Hey, Pobs. Anna Carpenter, all the way from New York, but sporting a British accent, so she will be representing all international talks as well. And Jen Hubbard from Nashville, Tennessee. Hey,
hello.
How's it going, everybody? So just to kick it off, and to the audience, I know this is not a conventional panel where we can't hear you in real time, but we will have a Q&A at the end, and we welcome all questions. And I just want to start this off by saying, if aspects of music publishing confuse you, don't make sense, you can't figure it out, consider yourself in the majority. So no question is stupid, and we encourage you to ask. This is what we do for a living, and we may talk through things that are second nature to us, but if any questions come up about what publishing is, what we do, what we referred to the panel, I really encourage you to educate yourself and ask us, because there's, what's the expression? The only dumb question is the one not asked. So remember that, dear friends. So to start off, oh wait, I've got to read you a little bit about Concord Music Publishing. I'll keep it brief. It wasn't 9 a.m. I'd have this memorized, but now I have to read it for you. Concord Music Publishing is a global full-service independent publisher based in Nashville with offices in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, London, and Berlin. Concord Music Publishing owns or administers more than 600,000 copyrighted musical works spanning nearly 2 centuries of songs through vast array of genres and territories. Impressive, right? Yes. To start us off, I would like to go to Pablo, and would you give us just a brief overview of what a music publisher actually is?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. So what is music publishing? Music publishing is the side of the music business that is related to the song, to the composition, okay? So there's two main basic copyrights in the music industry. There are the rights that are related to the sound recording that is created by an artist when it records a song, and those rights and that artist is represented by a record label. Okay, then there's the other half, which is the song, the composition, which can be summarized as the melody and lyrics of a song in the pop world, if you will. There are the rights to the song. The song is created by the songwriter, and then the publisher represents the rights of the songwriter and the songs. So in basic terms, that is music publishing. Just to give you like a quick example, the song "Shallow," that was an award-winning song from a few years ago. That was in the movie "A Star Is Born." We, as Concord, we represent the rights that as it relates to the composition of that song. And then Interscope, they represent the rights to the sound recording of that actual song. So that would be actually the two main differences between the sound recording and the composition. And as publishers, our duty is to collect all the income that is generated by the rights of those songs, whether a song is being performed live, or the song is being used on TV or at an ad. As publishers, it's our duty to obtain those opportunities and collect that income for that song. So in a nutshell, that's music publishing.
Thank you, Pops. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Grace, I'd like you to tell us all about what we as A&Rs do at a publishing company. If you could give an overview on our job.
Sure. So I kind of see there being two main parts to our job in the creative sense. So the first one is obviously find and sign songwriters. And this could be artists, producers, top liners. The only one we're not interested in signing are people that don't write their own music, artists, because otherwise then we wouldn't have anything to represent. So that's kind of a very main part of our job, going out, looking for new things, talking with managers, lawyers, labels, kind of see what the new projects are. And then the second side of this is just to support our roster creatively in any way they need. So differently from labels, where they're more likely to be based off album cycles, we are creatively involved all year long, no matter what they're working on. And so that could encompass setting up sessions, pitching songs, giving feedback on songs, and essentially just being their spokesperson and advocate within the industry. And then we also kind of the liaison between the writers that we have and internal departments. And so that could mean sync, making sure sync is across all of our new signings and all the songs. So they are kind of across all our priorities. And we also liaison with the legal team, copyright, royalties, just to make sure all the information is right, because arguably the most important part of music publishing, as Pablo said, is making sure that we are collecting money correctly on behalf of our writers. But yeah, I personally find publishing to be the most creative part of the music industry. And I kind of call ourselves Switzerland in a sense, because we can be friends with everyone all the time. And it's an incredibly collaborative process.
Beautifully said. And I concur. In publishing, I think I could speak for all of us here and add to what Grace was saying. What I like about it too is you never know where the day is going to go. You never know what a songwriter is going to do. It's not always deadline based. It's like a songwriter could spread their wings and decide they want to write for someone else, write for themselves, write for a film, write for a sync opportunity. And it's just great. Like no 2 days are the same. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. But getting into the meat of this panel, so our jobs have always been, we deal directly with our writers, and we go see them, we go to studios, we go to shows, we interact with them constantly, we interact with the various members of our industry constantly. So this panel is talking about what happened to us and what happened to all our peers, and really, to just put it in terms that everyone can appreciate, what happened to everybody when this happened. And I'll just speak for myself to start off. I went into full-on panic. I went into full-on, oh my God, I can't do my job. How am I supposed to do my job from my house? I hadn't heard of Zoom yet. I was like, couldn't wrap your head around, none of us had ever done it exclusively in solitude, reaching out to the world. And so when we went into this, I really panicked, y'all. I really went like, oh my God, this is like, they're not going to need us. What, we can't do our jobs. How are we supposed to function it? I'm curious, did any of you share that sort of panic fear when it went on, or was it just me?
I think for me at the beginning, no one realized that it was going to last for the longer than the 2 weeks that we were going to be out of our offices. So we were like, oh, Thursday, well, we're not coming in on Friday or Monday, sorry, see you in 2 weeks. And it was the first, it was just like, okay, we'll be back and we'll just get on. And then after that 2 weeks, it was like, oh, we've got to get our shit together and work out how we can do this. Not realizing that 18 months later, we would still be doing this. But yeah, definitely. At first it was a weird kind of like, oh, excitement's probably the wrong term to use about it, but it was novel. And then it was like, oh God. But we pulled it together.
Yeah, I remember I was leaving Nashville and I wound up coming straight home to quarantine. And I said to Jan and our coworker, Brad, I was like, all right, 2020, the year we're going to work at home for 2 weeks. And then the next day it was like, oh, this has all changed. But I'm curious to like, what was the first thing that happened? And I'd love to sort of roundtable it with y'all, whoever wants to answer, that made you realize this would be okay. And I'll start, if that's okay, by saying mine was meeting with one of my writers on this. And I was sort of looking panicked. And then after 10 minutes, I was like, oh, this is like meeting with you, but I don't have to get on a plane. And we're still talking about art and we're still doing it. And still at that point, I'm like, could I do this with a stranger? But that was the first thing that made me go, okay, I could do my job. Do you remember like a moment where you just adapted?
I know for myself with Zoom specifically, it was being able to learn how to take a pitch meeting. And pitch meeting, if people are not familiar, it's pitching songs to A&Rs or managers for artist cuts on projects, and learning how to adapt in that way to pitch songs to people who I wasn't able to meet with in person. And really Zoom was one of the best platforms for that because it had allowed me to just share my sound. And it's for the person on the other side, just sounds like the music's coming through their computer. So for me, that was one of my moments of going like, oh, like this is easy. And I don't have to leave my house. Like I don't have to drive to this meeting and sit down with somebody. And like, obviously those are great parts of it and all of having that interaction. But it was also like, oh, I can keep doing and operating the way that I was operating before, but just from the comfort of my home and through a computer screen.
Yeah. In my case, I also panicked, just as Tom did after 2 weeks, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I think that a good part of this gig is the social aspect to it, just going to shows, going to the studio, meeting people, face to face, other people that either people that you're trying to sign or people that you're working with, like you always like want to get them, to know them face to face. I think is like the best way. So to me, like it was really hard, especially at the beginning, to make that switch from taking a meeting at a studio or an event or a coffee shop and then going to Zoom. It made it a little awkward at the beginning, but I think it also took like a bunch of the BS from it. It was like, okay, like I'm talking to a stranger, like we need to address like whatever it is that we're talking about. No small talk. How's your pandemic? Good. Okay, now let's talk. So it was kind of weird. And I think that I still miss that part of the gig, which is like the live interaction and going to shows and all that. I think that's a huge part of it. And I hope that we go back to that, like once times are normal, because I think it's very important for us to experience music in a live setting, either a studio or a show, and talk to the actual creators, like with no screens. So yeah.
For me, the moment that I felt like it was going to be okay, because I think my biggest fear was kind of doing this job in isolation and not being out and about and meeting people and kind of getting all the information. We had a meeting with a label with 35 of their A&Rs, 30 people. It was crazy. And they went through all their projects. And I was like, oh, people are being like, everyone's in the same boat as me. we're all just trying to figure out and like how to communicate information effectively. And like, they're trying to have their artists work as much as we're trying to have our writers work. So it was kind of that feeling of camaraderie of like, oh, we'll all figure this out together, and it's going to take some time, but it's not like I'm the only one struggling to figure out how to be as effective as I was before. And so it kind of was in those moments and those meetings, I was like, okay, it's going to be fine. And luckily there was like a lot more information being passed back and forth in that time also, which was very helpful for our writers too.
I think that the two things too for me was the moment I sort of, it sounds funny, the moments I really grasped the idea that this was global. That when we as humans have encountered troubles in the past, they've been regional. If it was Katrina, or if it was the Nashville floods, or anything that happened, though empathetically, we all cared, we all stood up for our brothers and sisters. It was really something that happened to a regional place. It really affected one area. And for this time there was a comfort almost, I hope that's not an appropriate word, to go, I'm not in this alone. I'm not in this alone. And as you start to talk to people, and as I started to talk to more people, I was like, and from everywhere, I was trying to talk to my writers, because one of the things, a big part of our job, which Grace alluded to, but it's a massive part of all our job, is to be there for our writers, and to be as much of a beacon as we can for them, and to be that pillar of encouragement and strength. And suddenly when you're feeling, I don't know what's going to happen, I'm not sure what's going to happen, it made me nervous until I started meeting with our writers. And then I found I was getting as much support from them as we were giving off to them, and just talking through the process was so important. Another thing that I just think was incredible for us, just to see all you listeners can understand how we work as a group, was pretty soon into it, maybe 2 weeks into it, we all share one boss, Kim Frankowitz, who's based in the UK, set up a Zoom meeting for the entire staff. And for the first time in our existence as a group, we had weekly meetings. Because we're on all different time zones, we'd all do our individual meetings. There's some meetings we were collective, but we never did a meeting there. And that was huge for me. That was huge for me, not only getting to see you all, but getting to learn about some of our coworkers in far off lands that I hadn't worked with yet and found I was working with more, and just being able to share the struggles and share the triumphs as it was going on. I thought it was just a really important move to the to getting on with it.
Yeah,
at that point.
No, for sure. It made the world a smaller place, and it not only helped us as a team, I think, but it also helped the writers and the artists in a way, because before, when you were trying to book a session for two writers that were that were touring or that were in different parts of the world, it was never an option to do like a Zoom session. And then all of a sudden that became like a normal thing. So now we can do sessions with two top writers that are in London or in New York, in two different parts of the world, and they'll just meet for a few hours in Zoom and try to create something. So I thought that was huge, and it definitely helped in that regard. We can book some better sessions, between people that are busy always. So
I think something that probably you said about not being able to meet people in person, when you getting on a Zoom, you cut the BS. That's what some of the songwriters have found, that sometimes you get the nice thing, you go sit in a room, you order food, you have a chat, someone will go on social media, but the ones who have really adapted to writing on Zoom will get on, they know what they're doing, they'll focus on writing the song. They might have a break just to kind of go and work out what's right and what's not right, then come back on, and it's over and done with probably in 2 hours, whereas normally you're in a studio and it takes a day. which some people, I know we have some songwriters who find it, hard enough to write a song in the room with somebody, let alone on a computer. But we've had other songwriters who just have loved the speed and the focus of this, and I think they will continue to do this kind of ongoing, even when now that studios are starting to open up.
Yeah, also to piggyback off that, especially in LA, sessions usually get canceled and rescheduled and moved around 1,000 times, and it actually takes up a lot of our time and also can be really strenuous for the writers, just getting things moved around. And so what Anna was saying, where it's efficient writing the song, it actually was very efficient for scheduling also, because you put a session in and it stayed in because no one had any excuses. They didn't say they had something else came up, or they were, what else were they doing? Especially for part of last year. So in that sense too, has actually made our job a little bit just different last year, where a lot of our time wasn't spent rescheduling things. It was more about proactively just putting Zoom sessions in, which is a very different dynamic for us for a while.
And although we're starting now, to see that it's starting back up again, isn't it?
It was a nice respite for a bit though.
It's yeah.
But do you think this will, and for everybody, this will be part of the future though, right? Like, say, because now that's what I'm finding is like, wow, I live in Nashville, but I can write with that person in London. And I'm no longer, and I could at least talk to that person in London, even if we're writing sort of postal service sort of way. There's that communication that's opened up between writers that I think that's great, and that's here to stay. Would you all agree?
Yeah. And I also think on an economic level, like it becomes, you don't have to if people are willing to still get on Zoom even after this time, it's a lot cheaper to jump on with somebody who is in London than making a trip to London. And maybe the trip comes later, but if you're able to develop that relationship first via Zoom, then it might make sense to make the trip later. But just making the trip to try to build relationships is a lot of money spent. So it becomes more economically friendly.
And I found too, is unlike most of you or all of you who are heavily in setting up sessions all day, my roster tends to be artists and bands who are sort of self-contained, who were terrified, absolutely terrified of the idea of the Zoom write, and watching them adapt over this time and just being able to have that virtual cup of coffee, even if it's just that, has been pretty incredible. Have you found people have not just accepted it, but they're like into it? And Jen, your areas, so I mean, you have probably the most co-writes, I mean, in Nashville, I'm talking about your community, but anywhere in the world, it's constant. Now it's starting to open up a bit, but did you find people there pretty quickly adapted?
It was a mixed bag. And I think that was probably across the board, and to the point of like how we work and how we operate as publishers. I often say that my role is to facilitate their creative needs. So one of the struggles that I did find was like having to relearn all of my writers' creative needs that like at that point were very much second nature. And then I was like, okay, are they wanting to do Zoom? Are they okay doing Zoom? Will they do Zoom? Who is? And there was actually like a really cool community thing that ended up happening where some of the publishers started putting to like in town too. So everyone was really being helpful just across the publishing community, putting together this Excel document that like outlined like what writers in the community were open to doing Zoom and who were willing to do it. And so we had that kind of template to see who was open. And it came to a point when everyone realized that after those 2 weeks that this wasn't going anywhere, and that you kind of had to start doing Zoom if you wanted to be writing within the community, that people quickly started adapting to it. But there were some people who were far later adapters to it, because it was that hope of like, okay, well, maybe next month we'll be fine. So yeah, it was. And then there were some people who like, it was the best thing that happened because they live in Utah and were able to work with people and not have to make that trip to Nashville. So there were mixed bags of what worked for people during that time.
Well, I want to segue that into, and another thing that was, and I think for all of us, but I know my personal story was, I was like, how are we going to sign people? How are we expected to, okay, we can connect our writers we have relationships with, we talk to the publishers we have relationship with, but how do we meet? And my personal one was, it was funny, when I was flying home from the trip in Nashville, direct into quarantine, it was March 11th, 2020, and didn't know what was going on. I was sent by a producer, Dan Nobler, a friend of ours in Nashville, a record he had just done by a person named Allison Russell, and I fell in love with this record. And it was written by her and her partner JT Nero, and I was just in love with this record. And in the meantime, they were getting a record deal with Fantasy Records, and I wanted to meet with them. And I'm like, this is gonna. I was terrified. I've never done this, not looking someone in the eye. And within 5 minutes, you just realize, oh, when you meet someone whose art you're into and you connect with, it kind of doesn't matter. And we did a deal, and it's so strange, because we did it. I met him in April. We did a deal sometime in the fall. But it was funny. Last week I was talking to them, and I'll see them on Zoom every once in a while, and I just looked at them and went, "How tall are you?" You know, it's just like this thing. I was like, I have no idea if you're like 3'2" or 6'5", but the connection was able to be made, and the actual A&R gig kicked in as normal, and it really like warmed my heart that you could still make those connections, and those connections were strong through digital technology or in person. And I'd love to know some stories of you all in signings or in pursuing acts. If you can tell me a little bit how that went.
Well, there's we signed a DJ producer artist called Imanbek. Well, Harry, who sadly wasn't on the call today because he said he's COVID jab. And so that was brought to us. Imanbek is in Kazakhstan, cannot speak a word of English, but we connected with his manager, who is Russian. So a few of us had a call with him, which that was one of the great things about the Zooms, that we could all as a team speak to this guy and show him what an international setup that we are. And obviously he was doing this with other people as well. So you think it's a fair playing field, because everybody has to do these meetings on Zoom. And thankfully, he chose us, and I sadly wasn't on the call because of the time zones, but they did have a signing party with Imanbek, and the Russian manager was translating what Imanbek was saying to the team, and backwards and forwards. And so we've never met him, but he's now signed to a company, and he's got an Alan Walker single out today, and he did the St. John Roses remix. So, really excited to work with him and at some point meet him.
And I think one of the other things about signing people during this time is that we could still put in all of our creative energy as much as we were before, and show people. I know there's an artist out of Ghana that's not quite done, but we started talking to her last year, and I don't think we could have gone to Ghana anyways to meet her originally, but through the pandemic, lots of Zooms, and then our creative energy was just the same as we would have been doing before, sending ideas. And I think it's even a little bit easier, as Jen was saying, when people don't live in these like major markets where there's all these sessions going on all the time, people, and especially artists, tend to be more open to having these intro meetings, or producers have these intro meetings, so then sets the relationship up for when they do end up traveling. So I thought that's something that in the beginning I was worried about, that part of signing, and then realized that we can do our job at the same level. It just looks a little bit different, but the same. And that's how we, as a team, the way that we approach signing thing is to get the most energy around ideas and creative things before. And so we were able to still do that, which I thought was a testament to our collaborative team and our work ethic. And so still was able to do it.
Yeah. Two of the recent signings from the Miami office, or close to recent signings. There's people that that I never met either the artists or their teams, and that we would just and that we've been talking for the last year, kind of like in therapy mode, because of the pandemic. So even though we didn't meet, it gave us the chance for us just to talk on the phone more often and have more Zooms with other people from the team. So it actually helped. On the other side, being in Miami, we benefited from like a great migration of artists and producers that moved from New York and California to Miami, either temporarily or for the long haul. So like all of a sudden, like all these people that were usually working in LA studios and New York studios, they were here because of the pandemic. So that was an interesting effect of the pandemic, that it allowed me to meet with more people than I usually meet with because of being in Miami. So.
Absolutely. And real quick for our viewers, listeners, what have you, if you do have questions, you can populate them in the Q&A portion of the screen here, and we will get to them in the last 15 or so minutes of the panel. Well, so look, the punchline here is we all figured out how to do our jobs, and we all figured out how to do it, and I think kind of expand on it. The missing part, as Pab said earlier, is that human touch, and I do miss seeing Grace in the office every day and be able to bounce ideas off her. But it didn't stall anything. It just reinvented the way we all communicate and the way we communicate with our writers. For the benefit of the audience, who I assume are a number of aspiring, successful songwriters, managers, producers that are out there, I'd like to know, and this is something I'd like to, again, roundtable with everybody. What's your discovery period now? Like what's changed for you, and how does someone get to you? How do you find music? Has it changed? I mean, obviously we're not going out as much, but I'd love to know from each of you sort of, what you're doing now to do your job, and do you think it will stick as we're re-entering the world?
I'll only start to say, for me, this was actually my biggest moment where I was stressed during the pandemic, because it was very hard, with Nashville being so much of a show city, and going to shows and going to what we have in our city called writer rounds, and getting to see different songwriters play their material. This was a moment where I said, how do I find people? And it was a learning curve of learning new avenues to really discover new artists and new writers. And I'll let more of the pop team talk about what they've done, but like they were also very helpful for me in really finding new ways to discover new music and new artists who were on the rise.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's still obviously very relationship driven. And so I think within the pandemic, instead of me running into people out at shows or at dinner or whatever, I just had to be way more intentional about thinking of specific people to kind of catch up with and figure out what's going on, and just being a bit more proactive, because you're not going to meet people out. But then the other side of this, and I'd be remiss not to mention, is A&R research has been around for a while, but I think the emergence of TikTok and a lot of those platforms have really changed the landscape of research. And I think TikTok was already moving in that direction anyways before the pandemic, but then I think everyone's stuck at home and social media use went up X amount %. And we saw a huge emergence of labels kind of focusing on TikTok signings and even using it in part of their marketing campaigns. So for us, it was really interesting. I don't think we haven't signed anyone based off TikTok, but we've had a lot of conversations around it, and also been able to get our writers linked with the emerging talent. And all of that comes from our research calls that we do. But it's been very interesting. Anna, I don't know have anything more to say about our research calls, but they're my favorite, and Pablo, favorite call of the week, of like kind of seeing what's moving. Oh, sorry, did I just cut out?
It's always very varied, the amount of stuff. There's like things that pop off on research which make me blush and make me laugh each week. It's very entertaining. But, you know, you can see things like that. Olivia Rodrigo just go crazy, and Salem Elise, and some of the, like Bella Porch and stuff like that. These are things that we're finding out via research, which are driven by TikTok. And our jobs is to either see if those artists have got a future and we believe in them, or, you know, get our writers in with them, and hopefully they can create some more kind of hit songs with them.
Yeah, I think the way we find new music is definitely changed from a more so going to live shows before, and now just focusing on video content online. You know, I call it TikTok, I call it Tiny Desk, or whatever. So I think this allowed the certain artists that are not only talented in the music space, but also in the audiovisual space, to just go to the next level. And so I think that now we're also focused, like, not only into live shows and how they write, but also how they portray themselves online, anyway, lost my train of thought there for a second. But yeah.
Well, I'd like to shift it into one. I had this discussion last night at dinner, and I'd love to hear from all of you. Is, what do you think the other side looks like? And when I say that, I mean, do you see trends coming up? Do you see? I'll say the one that I'm the most excited about, which honestly I don't think we'll see the fruits of the labor of this for maybe 5 to 10 years. But Fender this year announced that they had sold more guitars during the term of the pandemic than they had in their history. So I'm going, right on. There's going to be some like badass guitar players emerging, and I think that probably applies to across the board, to people learning programming, to people learning bass, to people learning. So you had a lot of people where other people were staying in, and you know, a lot of people. I saw the picture of everyone I knew cultivating their sourdough bread. You know, I grew my hair. That's all I did over the pandemic. What do you think, like, the other side looks like creatively? I mean, we've come through we talked about a very tumultuous time, a very challenging time. And I don't think there's been a moment in history, and especially now, where music hasn't done anything but thrive when we face difficulty as a species. So I'd love to know, are you seeing any trends, or do you have any personal predictions that of where the world is going?
I don't know if this is not necessarily a trend musically, but we've seen a lot more, because people were at home and having to like work out their own technology and stuff. So a lot more female songwriters are able to record their own vocals now, whereas before they'd have gone to the studio, and so they get more tech savvy. They've had to learn more production. So hoping that there's going to be some more female producers out there, because it's still a very male dominated area. And I think that's definitely happening. We had a call with somebody yesterday in England who saying, I do all my own production now. And I'm just like, you know, I think it's just a lot more accessible. So there's been this time that people have had the time to actually focus on it, because they've not been able to physically be in a room with somebody.
Yeah, so lots of a bedroom pop, right? So now, like, the tide is like definitely going to the side of just people being in their house and doing like everything, you know, doing like all the programming, doing all the vocals. So I see definitely more of that. During our research calls, we also noticed that during the last year, there was an increase in chill music, like in lo-fi chill music, as we assume is because, I don't know, people were stressed and just wanted to hear some background music and just be at ease. And as far as prediction goes, creatively, I think that the next wave of songs that are going to come in are going to be more just getting out there, a summer party dance songs, just like let it all out. Let's go party because the pandemic is over. So
I also personally don't think that TikTok is going anywhere. Like I think we're going to continue to see that as a very large driving force until there's another social media platform that changes that, but being a large driving force in what is making current popular music and what people are gravitating towards.
Yeah, the thing that I've noticed the most, which I absolutely love, is I think the walls have come down a lot between genres and between writers who normally were, you know, maybe isolated with their own for the longest time. And I think the ability to do nothing but sit home and listen to music, coupled with the TikTok mainstream story was a Fleetwood Mac song, which my friends 12-year-old girls then obsessed with. And I just think there was this real cross-generational and cross-genre awareness that's happening, which we've seen happen before, but I think we've seen it mostly happen in hip-hop in recent history. And I think like now we're seeing, and I just love it, I don't know a single, say, punk rock musician that isn't enthralled with Billie Eilish, that isn't like completely enthralled with like what she's doing, how she's doing it. And I think it's inspiring back and forth. I love this thing because that's how, again, not to get too political about it, before radio was deregulated in the 90s, there was less formatted radio and more just pop, which could encompass an R&B tune, a pop tune, a country tune that was doing well. And I think we're sort of headed back there, and I think it's really incredibly healthy. And I think I'm just seeing people on the socials just talk about what they're listening to and what they're loving and what's inspiring them. And I think that's coming from, being inside and having the ability to explore in a way that's why I love. Someone said that to me the other day. They're like, don't you hate that when you were a kid, the only records I could hear were the records that my buddies had? And I was like, no, oh my God. I go, I would have killed for this. I would have killed for the ability. It was only, I never knew what these things sounded like. And just the idea that you can, and you are, and I really think through this kind of jumping on what Pablo says, because I do agree, I think we're going to come out of this and everyone's ready to have a good time. And we're going to hopefully see a lot of anthems like that. But I think people are just so appreciative of their gifts and so ready to make art and ready to just do their jobs in a way that like anything else, any job becomes sort of mundane and run of the mill. And I think all of us on either side of the desk have been like, oh wow, this is cool. And once I'm unshackled, look out, it's going to get really good.
You're on mute, Tom. You muted yourself, Tom.
I said, and I just said the thing that was, I answered all the questions to the universe right there, but now you'll never know. I was just going to say we are 45 minutes in, and so let's go to a couple of questions in here. I will read them aloud and we can all jump in. I'm actually just going to permanently unmute myself so I don't do that again. There we go. All right. First question. Music publishing revenue was over $4 billion in the US, according to the NMPA. Where can I learn more about music publishing? Okay, I'll field that for one, and then I'd love you all to jump in with any answers to that. I have a Bible that I've used the majority of my career, and it's a book. Anybody wanting to, as I said earlier, if you don't understand music publishing, you're in the vast majority of it. The book I recommend for anybody to get is a book called Music, Money, and Success, and it's written by the Brabeck brothers, Todd and Jeff Brabeck. It is a fantastic book. Full disclosure, I know these gents. I've known them very well. Todd used to be my boss when I worked at ASCAP. Jeff is one of the heads of legal over PMG Music Publishing. It is a book unlike others in that you don't need to read it cover to cover. Chapter 1 to the end of the book. You will probably want to do that, but you can index it and look at the portion you want to understand, and it breaks it down in the simplest, most easy to digest, easy to understandable terms. I think they're in their 8th or 9th edition now. I think it's the 8th edition. but I can't recommend this book enough. Music, Money, and Success. And yeah, it's just like, I still use it pretty regularly. I see Grace nodding. I think she's also a believer. Anything else talk about where people can learn about music publishing?
I'm not sure where the person who asked the question is located, but a great resource in Nashville, and I know that they are an international organization and have different chapters everywhere, is NSAI, which stands for Nashville Songwriter Association International. And they have, as if you're a writer, you can, and I think also as publishers or individuals, you can get like a membership with them, but they are a really great resource and are passionate about songwriters and want to help inform people about songwriters and the needs of songwriters and songwriters getting paid more and all of those things that we fight for every day. And so they are a really great tool and a group of people who can be a resource as well.
Also, the performing rights societies are a great help for a songwriter wanting to get some information, and those are primarily BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and GMR. And you could go on, and they all have representatives that can answer a lot of really basic questions for you. And again, can't stress enough, the only stupid question is what? The one not asked. There you go. So know your business. And I always say that to everyone, understand your business, understand what publishing is. If you decide to do this for a living, you need to treat it like your job, and you need to understand what's happening at every moment. Your publisher, if you're signed to a publishing company, you can ask them, like, what does my deal mean? How do I earn? What does recoupment mean? Ask all these questions. It's vital. It's vital to know. Next question. Have you noticed a change in the prevailing tone or emotion of songwriting and songwriters in the last year? More anger, more joy, more escapism, more sad and introverted songs, or the opposite? Or is it the same mix as always? Good question. Someone want to?
Yeah, I would spot two different trends in the last year. The one that I mentioned was a more ambient, lo-fi, chill music, it seems, that we spotted on. And the second one would be a music that's created for TikTok and for that medium. So either simple beats with simple, catchy lyrics that are no more than 30 seconds, or anything that's is geared towards TikTok, I would say, is the second trend.
It kind of, for us, it depends on what the artist is wanting as well. We get a lot of our briefs from artists and their A&R managers. So for me, some of the established artists still haven't really changed those. If you're a male singer-songwriter, it's a similar sort of thing. But definitely echoing what Pablo said, because of the amount of TikTok artists that have been signed, there's been a lot of, can you write a hook that will kind of grab somebody in the 15 seconds that it's going to get played on a little video on TikTok?
Yeah, I think for our songwriters, it's, I guess, more not about the lyrics as much. I feel like it's still a pretty wide range of what they're writing about when they're going in just to write a song. But I have found that some of the production obviously is always evolving, but there tends to be stuff that, as I said, more geared towards social media things. Not all the time, but a bit more.
From my end, and I'm curious, Jen, if you're seeing the same, because we both you sort of deal equally with writers and artists. I deal almost exclusively with writer-artists, that through the thing, they were having the same emotions I was. Meaning, I'd get the pissed off song, I'd get the on my couch crying song, I'd get the sun will come out tomorrow song, I'd get the sun won't come out tomorrow song, and we're all doomed. And I'd like to think, and I would think, there's actually a really spectacular on Apple TV right now. There's an 8-part documentary special called 1971, The Year That Changed Everything. It's so good. And it's basically music's reaction to tragedy and change and and what's been going on in the world. And it's fascinating to realize how much iconic music did come out of these times. And when we look at it, iconic music is not just protest music. Iconic music could be the most joyful music that comes out to make you celebrate, as Pablo referenced earlier. But I have a feeling we're going to see some, I think we're going to see some real responses to this time and the world. And if you watch this special, it's really interesting how those responses can come in the form of a classic, punk rock angry song to the most beautiful pop ballad you've ever heard. And I don't know how you go through this, and this is I think the punchline. I think we'd all agree here. I don't know how you go through the past 15 months and not change. And like I said, and it's not for the worst, but I think it's affecting everyone, even if just in their appreciation of doing their job. But it's going to affect the writing, I believe, and I think it's going to do it in the most wonderful way possible. So that is it. And I just saw a comment, and I owe Loretta Munoz from ASCAP is the one who recommended me to watch the special, the 1971 special on Apple TV, because I've been with her when I've recommended it to other people, and she's been like, I told you about that. Okay, so let's see, one more question I think we got. And what is everyone looking forward to as tours come back and things are starting to go back to normal? What should songwriters expect?
I think something that I'm already seeing, which isn't necessarily a positive, is because tours are coming back and so rapidly and heavily, where we almost had access to so many people all the time, that access is becoming a lot smaller. Specifically with touring, there is just, in the country market, it often happens on the weekends. So it's like that Thursday through Friday, or those Thursday and Fridays are like going to be completely gone for a lot of people of having access to artists. And then because that artist time is more limited too, it just is going to make that whole process just a little bit harder. So I'm going to miss all of the accessibility that we had during this time to individuals.
Interesting.
I've been finding that because artists haven't been able to tour, they've been writing a lot more. So whereas an artist might have written like 20 songs or 30 songs for their record, they've written 100 over this time. And so our songwriters who have worked with these people, and the chances of their songs getting cut has been even less. So in a way, and the accessibility is not the same as in Nashville, because they plan a tour maybe over the summer or something like that, but then you have access to them the rest of the time. So I'm hoping that there's going to be less songs having to be left. There's less songs being left on a shelf. Yeah.
Anyone else? Grace, Pobbs?
I'm just happy that the live music is back. And again, I think it's a huge part of the ecosystem. And even though we deal with publishing, it's a huge part of what we do. And I think it's great. And it allows us to go see the writer or the artist from another angle. And I just get to know more about how he creates and how he portrays himself. So I think it's only positive that there's going to be more shows and they're back. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think also the floodgates are really opening in terms of writing, and the artists that were really insular and were really careful and didn't want to do Zoom sessions, because there were a few of them that like just haven't written very much, and now it's felt like in the past, as people have been getting vaccinated, I think it's a really exciting time for songwriters too, because I think at the same time there is going to be limited accessibility to some of these touring artists, but at the same time there's just going to be a lot of I think important songs being written, as Tom was saying. So yeah, it's kind of on both sides. There's like less accessibility, but more accessibility at the same time. But yeah, I'm personally very excited for touring to come back and for people to get their income streams back, most importantly.
And please, to all of you, keep writing songs. If you manage, encourage your artists to write songs. We literally do not exist unless you write songs. If the chicken eggs, if we don't exist without songs, and the world does, it literally stops turning if you don't continue to write songs. And we rely on you. We thank you for it. We all soundtrack our lives to the music you write and understand just how important your job is. And I just want to add in one other thing coming out of this before we say our goodbyes. There's a resource out there called Music Cares, and it's musiccares.org, and it's Music Cares with one C, MUSICARES. And they're there to help songwriters, people in the music business, anybody that works in or with music on the creative side, on the business side. And they help in so many ways, from problems with addiction, health, financial, re-entering society, which I think is really important to talk to. In the beginning, I could not wait to get back to the office. And now I admit I'm sitting here going like, the outside world, okay, I got to get myself ready to do it. It's normal to feel that. It's normal to get nervous about going into sessions again. It's normal to do all this stuff. And they have a variety of apps that are available that can help, meditation apps, as well as group Zoom sort of therapy sessions. And they're just the most amazing resource set up for the creative community. So please, if you're struggling at all in anything, don't be quiet. And if you know someone who's struggling, don't be quiet. Send them to musiccares.org. These people are angels sent straight from above, and they're here to help. And I can speak personally. I can't tell you how many friends, people I admire, and just wonderful people. They have literally saved their lives or really helped them along. So come back into the world. It's about to happen. We've beaten this thing. The world is going to start spinning again, and be healthy and be happy when you do it. Everybody?
Those were some great last words. I cannot compete with that, Tom.
It would be better if you said, no, I got one.
I second that.
It is so fantastic to see all of you. And again, I want to thank Caroline from Concord for setting this all up for us, and to Shira from the New York Music Month Extended Play for inviting us, to Grace, Anna, Jen, Pablo. I work with the best people in the world, and thank you for gabbing with me for this last hour. Have a great weekend.
Great weekend. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.